From the studios of my own bedroom. Welcome back, everyone, to episode 3 here on the Adam Hazara Show, coming at you from Burke, Virginia. I'm myself, Adam Hazara, joined alongside my broadcasting partner for the second straight episode and special guest, John Fedora. My friend, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well today, Adam. How's this nice Friday treating you?
Yeah, nice Black Friday. Did some part-time work at my job, Chloe's Cafe. Earned some good bucks for 5 hours. Awesome. How about you? What have you been doing over this Thanksgiving weekend?
Did some more college type stuff. Had to go to the Lake Braddock football practice to do the clock for him, and then for the rest of the day, mostly just been hanging around. Watching some sports, stuff like that.
All right, talk about them Lions. A nice little win over the Bears yesterday.
Yeah.
Don't you say? Of course, my Giants lost again, but we're playing close. That's, this Giants team has some grit. They're fighting. They're keeping it close. That's what I like about this team this year. That's something to cheer about, even though we're one of the worst teams in football this year. All right, so you mentioned Lake Braddock football practice. Well, they've been practicing hard these last few days. We're going to talk about it, break it all down today. We got the West Springfield game review. We're going to review some takeaways of that game. And then we're also going to be previewing the regional final game versus Fairfax tomorrow. Of course, me and John will be on the Lake Braddock Student Broadcasting YouTube channel tomorrow at 1 p.m. to be calling that game. Of course, our friend Coach Laguna, Lake Braddock freshman coach, formerly is now going to be coming back for that game. So big kudos to him for coming back. We couldn't love to have him on for this game. It's going to be an awesome one. Make sure you tune in 1 o'clock tomorrow for that. And also, guys, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe for more episodes, and to keep up with the show.
Yeah.
Let's start. Got mailbag questions. Type it in the live chat. You can also email the show at theadamhazarashow@gmail.com, all lowercase, or tag the show on X at Adam Hazara Show with your questions for a mailbag. So let's begin the show today with our shout out. It'll be our player of the game, at least mine. I'm going to go with JT Bordeaux. Of course, he went off. Another great playoff performance versus West Springfield on Tuesday night. 3 touchdowns in the first quarter. And it really set the tone early for Bruins as they went on to dominate the Spartans 54-19, a game that we thought it was all going to be a lot closer. Second year in a row where he's come up big versus Spartans in the playoffs. Last year, he had over 200 yards on the ground that game. And someone who just, seems to always really show up in the playoffs, someone who's really handled pressure well. Yeah. Of course, last year he took over for Jeremiah Brown, who was a starter most of the season, and then postseason took over because Brown got hurt, and then Bordeaux just went bonkers. I'll just say that, and he's just been a force ever since. Who do you got, John?
So for my player of the game, I have Kai Austin. He had 4 catches, 137 yards, and 1 touchdown. But the main thing for him last game is he was really good, whether it was a touchdown or just a big gain. He really beat those Spartan defenders over the top with his speed and great route running ability. And he, especially when Ty Jackson was in, Kai Austin was a very big force in that game against West Springfield. So that's why he earns my player of the game.
Yeah, especially he had that amazing run where he just got wide open from that Ty Jackson bomb. He's just something else. I don't think I've seen any quarterback with a deep arm better than him, just in a power and the accuracy. It's always been thrilling to watch, especially, again, with that Kai Austin, Ty Jackson combination. It just never, ever gets old. You could also do with Robert Holly out there, who had a really big game after not playing versus Mount Vernon. Certainly receivers went big. Both of them had over 100 yards apiece and a touchdown. And the Bruins, again, really pulled away. It kind of seemed like the first offensive drives of the game was going to be close. Bordeaux and then the Spartans star running back Mark Anthony White exchanged touchdowns on their first offensive drives. Mark Anthony White's was actually an 800-yard receiving one, really using his speed down the sideline on the Spartans' first drive of the game to make it a 1-point game, and then Spartans go on to tie it on that PAT. But then after that, Wake Braddock just kind of pulled away. They dominated on offense. Of course, mentioned the Bordeaux touchdowns in the first half. You had some dominant defense. Talk about the picks. One from Elijah Oladipo. You had one from Xander Quadros. You had one from Ken Gallant, who leads the Bruins in interceptions this year. Biggest game for secondary this year, something we've really talked about, how they're young, really stepping up here during playoff time, really showing their growth that they've made throughout their season, and it's been in a big positive direction and really showing their brights there. Again, this was a game that everyone expected to be closer, even with Wake Braddock expecting to win. Probably by at least by a score or two. I think it's what everyone had in mind. But then they really blow them out of wire. Everyone's surprised. I mean, they looked like Hayfield out there for a second night in a row, playing in the playoffs. After that Mount Vernon game, they won against them 56-6, and then they come in and dominate the Spartans 54-19.
And obviously, you had all those big-time local media personalities, though actually Chad Ricardo wasn't there, but other than him, of course, you had All Hitches there, NFHS there. Carl Frederick was there as well. And with all those guys being there, of course, they thought that was going to be a big-time, really close, really fun matchup. But as you mentioned, after that Mark Anthony White touchdown run after that pass from Scott Lewis, other than that, their offense really did not get going for the next 3 or so quarters. It
really wasn't until I think the Bruins pretty much had all their backups out off on defense with JV guys. They had Brady Davies at running back score a couple touchdowns late in the game, but by then the Bruins were just, Bruins had already won the game. So, those touchdowns didn't really matter at that point. And Mark Anthony White actually still had a pretty big game. He had well over 100 yards on the ground and in the air. And, besides him, no one else for West Springfield really did much. Bruins, of course, was superb production from their defense and offense, keeping them at bay. And of course, Bruins did a great job, reading Scott Lewis, intercepted him twice. Besides, again, Mark Anthony White, the Spartans really just were kind of in a comatose all game.
Yeah, and of course, you've got the thing that we know what Mark Anthony White is, and he's a star for sure. And you can let him do well against you, but just what the Lake Braddock Bruins defense did really well is they didn't let anyone else really get going. They had Walraff in there, they had Scott Lewis in there, and neither of them really were able to pick apart the Bruins defense like these Bruins QBs were able to do to the Spartans defense.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Cerise had a decent game, I'd say, but for the second straight game, he was pulled early for Ty Jackson, and then Ty Jackson really lit the defense up. Like you thought that it was a close game before, but then Ty Jackson comes in and he just absolutely dominates.
Yeah, and I'm talking about like that, but Bruins, he needs to get those reps. Ty Jackson, to some degree, needs to get those reps, and I think it should be, but it should be limited to some extent to keep him healthy for that Fairfax game in case they need him. And I'll explain why, because of course you have you only have 3 full days of rest, of course, with all the Hayfield stuff going on. That's really, changed the playoff bracket by a lot in Region 6C, not giving teams a lot of days of rest. But of course, you got Fairfax coming in next game, who gets over a full week of rest after Hayfield forfeits, so they won automatically. And the Bruins only have those 3 full days of rest, as I said. And, that's probably why they pulled Cerise early. They want to give, him some rest, give Ty Jackson some reps out there, who hasn't really played much, coming back from the injury that he had, and that sidelined him for about 5 weeks. He didn't come, he got out week 5 versus Fairfax and came back week 10 versus Robinson. Got a few plays in the air and there. And, again, I'm going to say this right now, and, people can interpret whatever way they want to. But, the guy who really will lead the Bruins to scoring in the air and really utilizing their receivers best is going to be Ty Jackson. He's like I said, his deep balls are something else. And Cerise, give him credit where it's due. He's a good quarterback. He can really open up holes for running backs in Bordeaux, Peyton Holmes, whoever it is out there that's good for him. And then, he could also utilize the receivers to a decent extent. He has Kai Austin, Halloween, Hibner, Harris. You could, the list goes on and on. All the guys who are over 6 feet tall and, who have a lot of speed, which is really what the Bruins are carrying. But, but again, for them to really get open and for them to score big time, put up big time points and really come into the clutch, score fast and really try to break away. Ty Jackson is going to do that. Cerise, he's a good quarterback, but I don't really think he has an arm that Ty Jackson does who will really allow, to push the game open.
Yeah, Michael has he has the game management type of abilities. Like, obviously, he's been the starter for most of this season. He's been the one that's led the Bruins to a lot of victories over these last couple seasons. And what I mean by game manager is he's able to, whenever he sees the defensive line or linebackers of the other side start and try and get after him, he's able to have that escapability that the modern quarterback really needs to have. You can't just have a pocket passer anymore. You need to have someone that is able to get away from pressure and still be able to make the right reads. But I agree with you in terms of the arm strength. Ty Jackson, he has quite the cannon there, but of course Ty Jackson next year will be his season. I think it's all right for them to keep playing Mike for some of the game because he's a senior. He needs to keep showing what he's been doing for this team for a bit. But yeah, Ty Jackson next year will be his year, and I think he's really going to ball out for sure.
Yeah, he's certainly, just imagine what he could have done in a full season's worth of play. And, of course, he still would have been a starting quarterback had he not gotten hurt in week 5. And, of course, Cerise took over for him then. And, Cerise was kind of forced back into the starter role after being benched during week 4 versus West Potomac, or coming into that game, I should say. But, again, I'm also going to say that, of course, expect another really big season. Jackson next year, he is expected to play a full season. He's definitely the starter next year, no question. And I also want to make another point. He's also going to be the difference maker when it comes to the Bruins. I don't know against Fairfax, but again, even though they scored 50 points in back-to-back games, you can't count on that happening, every game though, because Fairfax, they have a decent defense. Who knows how they could play. I'm not saying Bruins could go out and score 50 points again, but again, you never know. Fairfax's defense, D-line, if Davin Tolson, Travis McClain, and Harry Maltese, the linebacker, could really show up, give the Bruins a tough fight. And, it might not be the big lopsided game that it was, it has been for the Bruins the last 2 outings. And so, if you really want to make it lopsided, then use Ty Jackson in the air. He'll score the most points for you. I think he's going to be the big difference-making offense in terms of a quarterback, who I think is going to make the biggest difference. It's going to be Jackson. It's going to be. And I think, if the Bruins win on tomorrow afternoon over Fairfax, they're either going to be facing Madison or Washington Liberty. Now, in my opinion, Madison is a much better team. So that's who the Bruins will probably face. That game will be at Madison since Madison is higher in the PowerPoint system than Lake Braddock is. But, and Lake Braddock actually faced Madison week 2 earlier this year for a home opener. And Cerise, kind of really struggled to get going back in. But once they put in Ty Jackson, he got going against the Madison defense, which is one of the toughest defenses in the entire area. And so, he really shined. I really liked how he looked, had some really sharp and accurate throws. And I think for Bruins, there's an argument I think could be made there. Had they started him from the get-go that game, then the Bruins would have, probably played a lot closer with Madison that game instead of not losing by 3 scores. Maybe would have lost by 2 or 1 touchdowns, or who knows, maybe they would have even pulled off a close win versus the Warhawks. But I think, the Bruins coming into States, and, we'll talk more about this, if they win and, if we'll be playing Madison. I think, again, Jackson, all the other Bruins are going to be more prepared if they face the Warhawks in the state semis. And so, I think Jackson probably gives them the best chance against that really tough Madison defense.
Yeah, and you win tomorrow, and then like this whole week leading up to the game tomorrow, that'll be the last week of the sort of strange weeks that these Bruins have been going through these last couple. Like next week, they'll have the entire week to prepare for whoever it is. I'm gonna assume that it's gonna be Madison. Madison is, as you said, a lot of a better team than WNL. I mean, shockers have happened before, but Madison went to the state semis last year, and I think they can do it again this year. And this year, obviously, they're not going to be playing against Freedom or any team like that. They would be playing against us, so that would probably be a lot closer game than their one against Freedom last year.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, the Bruins are, yeah.
But I definitely think that the Bruins should beat Madison this time. This is definitely a lot more different of a team than Madison faced in that week 2 game. Obviously, it's week 2. You're still trying to figure stuff out as a team, and even though we had that dominant win against Colgan wasn't really that good of a team as compared to Madison, obviously. So we were, as I was saying, we were still sort of trying to gel together and know who we wanted at different spots, and now we know what that is. It's playoff time, and I think we can definitely beat them if we get through Fairfax tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, the Bruins, like you said, are better prepared. I think so, too. They're going to be much more in line to start. I think they definitely have a much better game plan against Madison, of course, after facing them the first time. So they'll probably live an old adage, in football, it's hard to beat 2 teams twice. That could very much so be the case in that game as well. And, I think going back to the whole quarterback situation, of course, going into the year, Coach Dock had preached many times for several months after last season ended that in the offseason, that was going to be a battle between Cerise and Jackson, regardless of how far Cerise carried the Bruins, which was to the state tournament for the first time in 13 years. He still really liked what he saw from Ty Jackson. He had an amazing offseason, got a lot more attention, was at some really good D1 camps. And so, Jackson was, I think, my opinion, the Bruins' most improved player this year. He's looked really sharp when he's been on a field. In some instances, he's probably been, I think, a lot better than what Cerise has done. I think you have an argument he could also be a first-team all-district quarterback. But, and I also thought that Cerise's job, it was his job to lose to Jackson, since he was the guy who was coming into the experience again. He was coming into playoffs, already experienced under pressure, leading them to states. In a year where the Bruins were bringing back a lot of pieces, may not defensively, but very much so offensively. They were bringing back a lot of senior experience, and on defense, they were bringing back Trent Payne and Xavier Maine, who were really good experienced players there defensively too. I thought it was going to be an uphill battle for Jackson going into the season, and actually Cerise, that was the case going into the season. Cerise, the first few games, was the starting quarterback until they made the shift to Ty Jackson, since Cerise was really struggling to give the Bruins some points offensively. The Bruins weren't really getting a lot of long drives going under him, I don't think. And I think it really has to go back to, the receivers weren't being utilized as much. You were talking to me before the show. You were saying, Bruins are running the ball, and, Cerise, was trying to open up more of those holes for, Bordeaux and Holmes or whoever you have out there at the Bruins running back position. And, he wasn't really, getting the big drives on offense that, he would want his receivers get with receivers you have, like Kai Austin or Halloween, who are great. But, like I said, you can really tap into their full potential when you use Ty Jackson as just his deep ball and beam of an arm. So I think Jackson is poised. I think he's earned it. And I think he could very well carry the Bruins through the full 12 minutes of all 4 quarters in any of these playoff games, regardless of who it is.
Yeah. Honestly, it's a very tough question because you've got Cerise. He's your senior leader. He's been your main guy for most of last season, and now after Jackson got hurt, he's been your starter for most of this season. And I think I like where they've been so far with the swapping of the quarterbacks. But also, as you mentioned earlier, I don't remember if it was before the show, but the reason that we've been swapping them, well, for one thing, we've been destroying the teams that we've played, but also it's been to conserve their energy and make sure that they don't get hurt or the 2 quarterbacks don't get too tired or anything like that.
Yeah, especially with those limited amount of rest days. So
yeah, but
that's important.
But also, I'd argue that it makes us better as a team because these teams, I mean, I don't doubt that they know what our QB system has been like, but it's like you've got one QB and then you take him out after a bit and then you put in a pretty much entirely different quarterback. And then they're like, oh, what are we supposed to do now with this guy?
Yeah, especially you mentioned that. Cerise is actually a righty, and then Jackson's the lefty. That could really throw defenses off. The change of the arm sides. Defenses would really have to figure out a good way to adjust to that. And, of course, adjusting to the distance that they throw. Cerise is, more short, medium pass guy, and then Jackson, all deep ball, all power. So you're really going to have to adjust between those two. And I really think that was kind of more so of a point of that whole 2 quarterback system that Coach Doc wanted to employ in the Bruins offense this year. Yeah. Now, we didn't really get to see it. We saw it more so, I think, a little bit towards the beginning of the season. But then once Jackson, after becoming starting quarterback, got hurt, you only had Cerise at quarterback. So you only had one of those 2 guys to really play for you at that time. And, they could probably employ it now since they have both guys healthy, which is great, in my opinion. Both give you some great strengths. So that's really good too. And so, it's an interesting system. Not a lot of teams are going to be prepared for it. There is going to be just overall a lot of teams who are going to struggle with it.
Right, yeah. And also getting to the actual Fairfax team itself, the main thing isn't necessarily going to be offensively. It's more so going to be how the defense plays because of obviously earlier in the season we watched the game and they just have this really nice rushing attack. Used to be 3 running backs that they could really put in there and they could move the ball with, but of course now Moman he's injured for the rest of the season, I believe.
Yeah, I'm in.
And then I heard from all hitches that Ethan Lynch might be injured, but I don't know.
Yeah, he's been a bit banged up.
Yeah, so now they might just have Maltese for this game and maybe a bit of Ethan Lynch. I don't know.
Yeah, we don't really know for sure if Lynch is going to be healthy. Now, I think you could assume that more likely he will be since he has all those days off over a week. So maybe he does get in there. Maybe he does get rested up enough depending on the injury. But again, we don't really know what it is. If it's bad enough to a point where even with over a full week's worth of rest, if it's still bad enough to keep him out a full game. So we'll see tomorrow if he plays. But we at least know that Maltese is going to be healthy. I'm in Moman. He was great for the Lions this year. He was first team all-district as a running back and defensive back, great on both sides of the ball. He was also co-offensive player of the year in a conference with Mark Anthony White over at West Springfield, who's their star running back, as we have mentioned earlier. Of course, well-known he is. Actually, all three of those guys have been injured this year. It's been a problem for Fairfax. Thing at times that really affects their offense because Coach Trey Taylor, he loves to run the ball. That's their main part of their offense. It's kind of more so pointed at that one-sided run game where you're really grounding and pounding. You could change up Molman, Maltese, and then you have Lynch. But again, I think a lot of times this year they've only had one of those guys available because everyone's just been hurt. Maltese, I think, for a span was out 4 to 5 weeks with some injury. And he was also big on defense for him. And, of course, they have Molman, who also plays in the secondary. They have Maltese, also a linebacker. I mean, they actually have a couple guys, I think are going to be more injury-prone because they play both sides of the ball, so they're on more plays. They're much more prone to getting injured more often. So that's maybe been a factor. So, they probably have had to preserve them a little bit too, at times this season. But I think, obviously, they'll at least have Maltese back for a game tomorrow. He'll be big on both sides of the ball. And then they'll have possibly Ethan Lynch, like you said.
Yeah, but what I was getting at is even though they do have Maltese, they're probably going to have to rely a bit more on quarterback Nick Murad and wide receivers like Penn Morris and all the other guys they've got.
Yeah, they have a tight end, the twin brother of Amon Moman, Zidane Moman, who was second-team All-District as a tight end. He only played 4 games there, by the way. He was pretty impressive. He was also really good at strong safety for them. This year, they also have Aiden O, who's a good 6-foot receiver for him. He was All-District as a sophomore. So certainly, O is one of the promising guys they have in receiving. But, I mean, they don't have any star-caliber receivers like the Bruins do. They don't have, like, a Kai Austin. They don't have a Halloween. They don't have a tight end like Hibner. Like Zidane Moman's good, but he's no Zach Hibner. So, I mean, I think the Bruins definitely in the passing game win, especially, no matter if Cerise, Jackson, a quarterback, whoever you put out there, Bruins are going to win it there. I think they still also are good in the run game, especially with the Lions not having Moman at running back. I think that'll be really big too. And, even if Blake Braddock is not fully rested, I think they'll still be good enough, maybe even great enough to win, even with Fairfax having their best player banged up on offense. All their weapons are still healthy. I think they've been doing a good job maintaining their health. They have Hibner, who's had only 1 catch, well rested. They have Peyton Holmes they can go to if they, maybe decide not to use Bordeaux as much. That might be a possibility too. And maybe the receivers, maybe Austin and Halloween might be a little less rested in terms of their stamina because I know they had some, they're still pretty involved in the game versus West Springfield. I know they kept Halloween and Austin out late when Ty Jackson came in after the Bruins were up by a pretty big lead. I think they want to have him in there so Jackson could get used to throwing to those 2 guys again as he's been injured. He hasn't been doing that a lot as of late, of course, being out for pretty much a whole second half of the season. So I think that's why those guys were in so long. Another thing is surprising about the West Springfield game. I'm surprised Wyatt Holcomb and some of the other backup/JV receivers didn't get in there as much for the Bruins because you look at a box score, most of the guys get the catch were still kind of a varsity starters. And never, some of the other seniors. We saw Xavier Maine we've seen him getting more catches. I think that's maybe a way to throw some other teams off. Maybe think he's going to play linebacker and whoop, you can pull him in at receiver. He's never a big body. You can throw to. I mean, the Bruins, right. I can think of like 5 big bodies Bruins can throw to who are over 6 feet tall. And you also got the QBs, Cerise and Jackson, who are 6 feet or above that height as well. That can really make the offense very dangerous and dynamic as it's been all year going into this game too. But again, and Wyatt Holcomb did get in there. He was the Bruins starting JV quarterback this year. But he didn't really have any throws. It was just more so the Bruins were just kind of going to their run game a little bit more. I'm surprised Holcomb didn't get as many of their chances, and maybe they maybe they shouldn't have I don't know about you, but I feel like maybe the Bruins should have rested maybe Austin Halloween a bit more, considering how much you're going to need him for Saturday with unlimited rest, only 3 full days again. And so, but again, they were trying to get Jack's back on his feet with, utilizing those 2 as receivers. So I get that.
Yeah.
But again, it is Certainly interesting to see how none of the other JV receivers or backups on varsity were kind of used. I mean, they were doing it on defense. I know in Mount Vernon game, had a lot of guys on defense. I know on offense, they still had some of the other varsity guys starting a lot. So, I mean, if they really want to rest them, that's something that, should strongly be considered, in my opinion. For games and situations you're going into like this.
Yeah, I guess obviously, as you mentioned, they were trying to get a lot more snaps for Ty Jackson with the main wide receivers in there. And I mean, for the most part, especially with the upcoming more difficult opponents that we've got, those are the people that are going to be in there. So it makes sense that they would want him to have a lot more passes thrown to those guys, and getting them more used to and more used to handing off to the running back, since obviously he's been out for five weeks, I believe, during this season, so he's got to get back into it. But I mean, he had over 200 yards last game, so I think he might be getting back into it right now.
Oh yeah, don't mess with him. That's someone you don't want to mess with. Certainly, yeah, I mean, he had a couple touchdowns in year one of Austin, one of Halloween, and he also had one on the ground as well late in the game. So be sure to look out for him now and again. Someone to really keep your eye on. I think he, when he's out there, he really makes the Bruins offense look like it's one of the toughest to face ever.
Yeah.
So you have, so you're going in Fairfax. This is a rematch of last year's regional final game, third straight for Fairfax that they're appearing in. So it's been really impressive for him what Trey Taylor's done. I think for a key for Fairfax, this game will probably be possession. They want to keep that Bruins dangerous offense. They're rolling in hot. They have back-to-back games where they have scored 50 points against, of course, a really bad Mount Vernon team that they faced in the first round. But second round, they still did it to a pretty good West Springfield team. Yeah. So I think, the Lions are really going to have to watch their backs there. So you're probably going to see them run the ball, probably do a lot of short passes. If you're going to get the passing game involved at any point, you're probably going to see, some more like conservative West Coast stuff, try and getting like short stuff down to Penn Morris, Aiden O, Zidane Moman, whoever it is that they have going after in receiver form on any play. And yeah, so I think that'll be important for Fairfax to do. Bruins also, I think on their side, they're going to, of course, have to stop a run, even with Moman being hurt, even with, Lynch being questionable. I still think that, they still have Maltese, of course. I still think that, Maltese really runs well through the Fairfax offense. He's still a big part of that. And, of course, Murad has some nice athleticism that he can use. So I really think stopping the run very you also want to take advantage of one of their weaknesses as well, which is Fairfax fumbles the ball a lot. Now, of course, they're a ground pound offense. Of course, running the ball more, you're probably going to be going head of steam and prove the defense up the gut a lot more often than not. So you're going to really have to, take your chances with trying to fumble the ball. Now it's kind of rare that you do that, but I think for Bruins, maybe it's a situation where, they might want to stack up a box a bit more, trying to get a big pile up on Maltese or Lynch or whoever runs right ahead into that gut and try to just bury him, try to get the ball loose and get it back. And, we talk about the Bruins' key possessions that they've been getting these last few games. The secondary's been big. They've been forcing a lot of turnovers. They did that versus Fairfax back in week 5, which they won 35-21. That was a pretty close contest. But still, Bruins have done a really good job forcing those turnovers lately.
Yeah, and you mentioned forcing fumbles. This Lake Braddock defense has 3 guys in Brown Callanan, Xavier Main, and Trent Payne that are really big-time contributors to their defense, and they really have the experience of being able to pop the ball loose from ball carriers or have big time sacks and big situations. So it should be interesting to see what the defense is able to do tomorrow against that Fairfax offense. They're probably going to be passing the ball a lot more, as I mentioned, but still look for them to have at least sort of a usual amount of runs for them, even with the one running back injured, and then Ethan Lynch, of course, he may or may not play tomorrow. But sorry if I'm getting off track here, but as of right now, the Oscar Smith Highland Springs game has just begun, so that'll be another foray into seeing what the state semifinals would look like. Of course, we will be calling our game tomorrow at 1 o'clock, and also at 1 o'clock tomorrow is the Madison WNL game, but it'll be interesting to see how it stacks up in the other semifinal for VHSL Class 6.
Yeah, we already have one matchup that's going to be determined today, and that was the Colonial Forge Patriot game where Colonial Forge won. I believe it was 42-14. I think you said the score was. I might be a point off there, but it was a score something like that, and they're going to be facing the winner of that Oscar Smith Highland Springs game. I think Oscar Smith are a favorite, so that game will probably be down in Chesapeake next weekend on Saturday. So that'll probably be a matchup, and of course, again, the Bruins Fairfax game winner will be taking on Madison or Washington Liberty. It looks like Lake Braddock and Madison are their favorites in their games respectively, so you probably expect that matchup next Saturday. That game, if Bruins face Madison or WNL, that game will be away, so it'll be in Arlington, or that will be in Vienna. So that'll be a good game out to travel to. Certainly, if it's Madison, WNL, like I said, I don't really think they're gonna have a chance of moving on. But on the off chance if they do win, that game would still be at Arlington, just with the way the two teams are ranked in the PowerPoint systems, with WNL being higher than Lake Braddock is.
Yeah, as you said, either way, no matter who wins that Madison WNL game, will still be visiting the opponent, which means that tomorrow will be our last game broadcasting for Lake Braddock football. So hopefully it'll be a good one. And then we would move on with a chance to possibly go to that VHSL championship game.
Yeah, that'll be at James Madison University. It's funny because the Bruins will be facing James Madison High School, and if they win that game, they'd be playing at James Madison University.
Yeah. And also, one of the schools that I applied to is James Madison, so maybe that'll be a good one to go to just to see the atmosphere there. But
sure, definitely be good for you seeing some good football there.
Yeah, and especially as the playoffs go on, it'll probably be better for me to be down there with the guys anyway, rather than up in the booth. Though it would be fun once in a while to be able to host one of those semifinal games, of course. But
yeah, we haven't hosted a state semifinal game since 2010 when Braddock faced Battlefield. That was Michael Niebrick's last year. For Bruins quarterback, of course, he was a former starting quarterback at Fordham about a decade ago. Of course, Bruins lost that game, and they haven't been to the state final since 2009 when they lost Thomasdale. So they're trying to get back up there, and I think this is actually a legitimate shot. I think where they could actually make the state finals for the second time ever.
Yeah.
And so for the first time in a decade and a half too. I think again they'll be prepared for that Madison team. Who they faced in week 2, and I think they've grown a lot, and they seem really poised to be ready for that really good Warhawks team. Again, we go back.
You can finish your thought after I say this, but even if you just make it to the state semifinals, I mean, back-to-back state semifinal runs are still pretty good in and of itself. Honestly, this is nothing against this current Bruins team, but I've watched this high school's football team for a while, and there have been more talented football teams, not just on paper but on the field. But in terms of when they get to playoff time, they just aren't able to get as far as these last couple of ones. So it's really nice to see it,
Yeah.
and especially to be a part of it, not just as a broadcaster but as a manager. Just been great. So even just getting back to the semis would be awesome. But obviously, the main goal is getting to that vaunted state championship. Even appearing in that would be awesome, especially with it being at a college football field again.
Yeah, I think certainly the Bruins. I think the teams that they face in the playoffs these years past recently, they haven't. I just think they've been just either upset. Just they've kind of gotten unlucky. Just things have happened. I think a couple years ago when the Bruins they had an awful loss to Fairfax, 63-21, and go figure, the Bruins are 4-0 since then. That was the Tony Rojas year where he was a senior and he went off. Of course, the starting linebacker now for Penn State. And I think he had like 5 touchdowns in that game, and the Bruins couldn't really get much going. I think they might have been a banged up that game. You might remember that Fairfax semifinal game. I'm not sure because I wasn't really commentating with you guys at the time, but I think I remember Coach Jock saying that they might have had some injuries going into that game. And then the year before, they were upset by West Potomac, Depop's junior year in 2021. They were upset by a good Wolverines team that beat a Tony Rojas-led Fairfax team in the first round, and then they would go on to the regional finals after beating Braddock in round 2 to lose to the eventual region champions in South County, who would then go on to lose to Mass in the state semifinals that year. But of course, there's the fact that Bruins have also had to probably go through much better teams, as well. Last year, we had to go through a much better Highland Springs team that was really good, one of the best in the whole state. That just outplayed the Bruins in every way. It was just a really good Springers team.
Yeah, and Highland Springs this year, they're a lot worse than they were last year for sure.
Yeah, not certainly as strong.
And as they're playing right now, of course, they're going to have to go through a pretty darn good Oscar Smith team, though. These last few years, Oscar Smith has been pretty good. But yeah, they're going to have to go through some pretty good competition if they want to get to that state championship again. But obviously not putting it past them after last year for sure.
Yeah, but I think this is definitely, in terms of state semifinal matchups you would face, I think this is definitely the most equal it gets in terms of who they're playing. I don't think Madison is nearly as good as the Highland Springs team that they faced last year. So I think they have a better chance there. I think that they would have a better shot against the Fairfax team a couple years ago with the senior Tony Rojas. Have they had not the set injuries if they did, allegedly. And then this year, facing that Madison team, I think, in some ways the Bruins are actually better than the Warhawks offensively. Defensively, the Warhawks might have an advantage there, but I feel like the Bruins at full strength, they could probably match and even be a bit better than that Madison defense. And so I think in terms of talent, in terms of the players they have, I think both are equal. Braddock's some better in some ways, Madison's better in some ways, but I really think it'll be a close game if the Bruins get to the state semifinal game versus Madison.
Yeah. Of course, Highland Springs right now, they've got a starting quarterback that's committed to Army. He's a dual threat QB, and obviously that's the type of QB that Army really likes to have there. So
yeah, they run the ball a lot, right?
Yeah,
a lot of those military teams,
especially with their quarterback. Their QB this year has like almost 1,000 rushing yards, I'm pretty sure. And actually, the last couple years, their QBs have been known to run the ball and stuff. So that would be a good situation for him. And obviously, it's the United States Military Academy. So even if he doesn't play too much, that's great education for him. So good for him. But anyway, yeah, Oscar Smith should be very tough for those springers to get through tonight.
Yeah, they'll be facing Colonial Forge next week if they win, or Highland Springs if they can come off with that victory. That game will be at, I want to say it will be at Highland Springs or Oscar Smith, regardless of who wins that game as they face Forge.
Because Colonial Forge is a 6 seed, so.
Yeah, so I think you could kind of just say, common sense, with a PowerPoint system, I think Oscar Smith would definitely have it, who's they're undefeated. And so they would be undefeated, of course, after tonight if they win versus Highland Springs. Highland Springs, has a few big losses, but I think, Colonial Forge has maybe about the same or even maybe a loss or two more than them. But I want to say that, both Highland Springs and Oscar Smith would have home field advantage over Colonial Forge, regardless of who wins that game.
But I mean, let's talk about the run Forge has made so far in these playoffs. They beat both of their rivals in Stafford and North Stafford, who were both higher seeded teams than they were. They beat Stafford 45-24, and then North Stafford 17-6. So
yeah, as a North Stafford team, they've actually always been pretty good in football. I know that they made states a few times in the late 2010s. Then they kind of went quiet for a few years. Say, hey, we're rebuilding a little bit, but now they have a really good head coach over there, and he's really done a good job turning that team around. And North Stafford actually almost beat Forge in round 2 of region semis over there in 6B. So that's a very good North Stafford team that they have over there, the Wolverines that they are, like West Potomac. And that's also another really good Stafford team. The Indians are a very good one who's also kind of broken out this year over there in 6B as well. Both teams, I think, could have definitely made the regional finals with side of a bracket they're on. They wouldn't have had to go for Battlefield. They might have actually been able to beat Battlefield. Since they're injured, they don't have O'Shea. And they would have trouble offensively, even with their FBS guys in defense.
It's kind of crazy how Patriot was able to beat Battlefield 10-7. Like that's the 1 seed that you're only allowing to have 7 points there.
Yeah, but then they have their starting quarterback injured, so you don't really have a quarterback, you can't really score much. So I mean, and plus the defense with all the FBS guys, Binkowski on the defensive line, Woodson who's committed to Pitt in the secondary, one of the best teams in college football this year. Binkowski, I believe, is an Army commit, and then I believe they have his name is Noah Blackstock. He's a linebacker who's committed, who has 2 D1 offers, FBS level, Virginia Tech and West Virginia. So I mean, he's only a sophomore, so he's a stud right there. And so of course, those guys did the best they could. They only allowed 10 points that game. It was just a touchdown, extra point, and a field goal. And without O'Shea, their starting quarterback, they're really not going to get much going on offense. I know Ethan Stowell was their quarterback taking over, but he is certainly the guy that O'Shea is.
Yeah, but it'll be interesting how the rest of these playoffs shake out here. Obviously, Oscar Smith and Madison, just because of how good they've been this season and the last couple of years, they'll probably be the favorites to meet in the state finals. But first, obviously, Madison's got to get through WNL, and then Oscar Smith's got to get through Highland Springs. So.
Yep. Yeah, again, back to Fairfax. I didn't want to bring up this point. You mentioned earlier that how Fairfax is probably going to get more of the receivers involved. They're going to probably do that with how Wake Braddock has been doing defensively and offensively. That's probably their best chance to give up with them is try to really stretch the field and then just trying to, try to maybe get some, try to get some big runs from Maltese or, Lynch or whoever again.
Yeah. I mean, it also, I know I probably say this word a lot, but it'll definitely be interesting with how the Fairfax offense goes tomorrow. I'm not going to say that they've been dominating people by any means, but they've been pretty good with that run game, and to lose potentially two big time running backs that you've used during the season, though for a lot of the season, you can have those running backs sort of going in there for each other. Of course, as you mentioned, because of the injuries that they've had at that position over the course of the year, which is really remarkable to how Moman, I believe you said, won the Offensive Player of the Year, especially with the injuries.
Yeah, it was mostly because of regular season. I think he probably got in. I think he got injured in like week 9 or 10. Not sure exactly when, but I know he had surgery on like November 12th. He posted it on social media. So yeah, he's been recovering for the last few weeks now.
Like you have them with Moman injured, and then of course last year Fairfax had Christopher Jones injured for their game against Lake Braddock, and then also for the rest of the season it was as well.
Yeah, the Georgia commit. He's a freshman there now this year. Certainly, I think the Lions would have had a much better shot in both of their games. I think he might have been healthy in that first game. Not actually, I think the first game he was injured as well versus the Bruins in week 5 last year. And then this year, of course, he's gone. And they don't actually really have any like FBS level guy like star like Jones, who was a Georgia commit last year. They had Rojas, of course, who's now Penn State. This year they don't really have any of that, but still, Trey Taylor, the head coach of theirs, done a really great job knitting together some good Fairfax teams that have been good enough to still keep up with some of the other really good teams in the district like West Springfield and Lake Braddock. So credits to him. I think he's definitely going to be a high candidate again for Regional Coach of the Year. I think Coach Doc will probably win it. It's because he's led the Bruins to back-to-back regional final appearances and possibly even the regional championship if the Bruins win that. But I think if Lions win it, then I think Taylor is probably going to have the edge there.
Yeah, I think a win against Fairfax tomorrow would definitely cement Coach Doc being the regional coach of the year. But it's going to be a lot tougher than the game against Mount Vernon for sure. You mentioned that Fairfax has a good defense, and definitely got to make sure you get the ball to JT, because he's been a big time performer in the playoffs for these last couple of years, and they really need to get him going as they have in previous games here. Also, make sure that you play Ty Jackson at least a bit, especially with that arm that he's got.
If the Bruins are down, you can go to him. He needs to be in there. If you're down by a score, go to him. He needs to be in there. Because I don't really think you can take the risk with Cerise. Trying to do short, medium passes, trying to get big runs. You can't bank on Bordeaux or Holmes breaking loose. The way you're going to really do that, and most likely get those big points, is by utilizing Jackson with his big arm, getting it to Austin and Holleen. I'm going to keep preaching it because, in my opinion, it's definitely the best way the Bruins can definitely get fast points on board and get back into the game, immediately.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say, my friend?
Sorry, I've just been following this Oscar Smith game, and it's actually really close right now. It's just 0-0. There's been big plays, like Oscar Smith missed a field goal, and then Highland Springs fumbled it deep in their own territory, I'm pretty sure. But then Highland Springs stopped them at the goal line.
Seems like it'd be a pretty good game there.
Yeah. But some more things I've got to say on this game that we have tomorrow is, well, for one thing, I'm really excited to be calling another one with you and Coach again, and should be a good one. Main factors will be how Fairfax is able to move the ball against this Lake Bragg defense, and how this Lake Bragg defense is able to react to that. Because the offense has been great. The the last couple weeks and even throughout the season. It's all about not how we can put points on the board, because we've been able to do that in a variety of ways during this season. It's about how this Bruins defense is able to stop Fairfax from putting points on the board. I mean, three points in a few drives is fine, but you've got to be able to prevent them from getting touchdowns, and especially rushing touchdowns, because that's this Fairfax offense's MO. Even without Moman, they're still going to be running the football. And as I said earlier, they might be going to the wide receivers a bit more. But, I mean, even when you lose one guy, you're not going to run away from what you know is your main mentality, which is running the football. You're never going to go away from that.
Yeah, and I think also another good reason to get the passing game involved a bit more, it's probably to avoid those fumbles, as much, just going, like I said earlier, going straight for the gut, you're going to be more likely to fumble the ball, especially with Fairfax's ground and pound offense. And they've had a habit of doing that a lot this year. I think it's a way to avoid that. And, you don't want to give up a turnover to this Bruins team. You don't. Because, they're probably going to be dangerous. They put Ty Jackson out there. Even Cerise is out there. They'll still probably, go to a good run game with Bordeaux, Holmes, whoever. Cerise could also get some good short, medium passes to Holleen, Austin. They could get some big gains for you. They can score with that. And so, I think to prevent that, to prevent those fumbles, you probably want to go to the air a bit more to be less likely to give a ball over to this red hot Bruins offense.
Yeah, for sure.
Anything else, my friend?
No. Can't wait to call another game with you and Coach Laguna tomorrow, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. And to our viewers, thanks for watching, and make sure to subscribe to my man Adam and his podcast here. So thanks for watching.
No, greatly appreciate it, everyone. Hope you guys enjoyed, and we are going to sign off. Again, tune into Lake Braddock Student Broadcasting YouTube channel tomorrow at 1. Me, my guy John Fedor here, and Coach Laguna will be on the call for the Lake Braddock Regional Final game between the Bruins and the Fairfax Lions for the second year in a row. We can't wait to see that game, and can't wait to have you guys on. So tune in. Also, of course, like you said, subscribe. Make sure you leave a like. Share with your friends. And tune in next time for next episode. For the Adam Zera Show, I'm Adam Zera with John Fedor signing off. See you guys next time.